Manhattan grand jury has indicted former President Donald Trump in connection with the hush money payment scheme.
It's a process that is likely to see him have his fingerprints and mugshot taken.
We do not know yet what is in this sealed indictment.
Now, for those who came late, it all started in 2006 when Donald met Stormy.
I was like, someone should take that magazine and spank you with it.
You told Donald Trump to turn around and take off his pants?
Yes.
And did he?
Yes.
Yeah, not exactly a fairy tale romance.
He's like, wow, you are special. You remind me of my daughter. And this was not a secret. He never asked me not to tell anyone.
But by 2016, the Donald had become the candidate. And on the eve of the presidential election, he decided he could do without the drama. Trump's lawyer paying Daniels $130,000 to keep the extramarital affair off the front pages. So far, so tawdry, and allegedly so illegal.
It's the cover-up. Donald Trump lied in his accounting procedures. He said these were legal fees. The other part of this is those initial payments from Michael Cohen were an illegal campaign contribution. So accounting and campaign finance are the two breaches we're looking at here.
Cohen flipped to give evidence against his boss back in 2018, copping a 3-year sentence for his troubles. Now, New York's district attorney has gone where his two predecessors feared to tread after a former president.
No sitting or former US president has ever faced criminal charges.
The indictment tips the 2024 race into chaos.
If he does get convicted and win the presidency, would he govern from prison?
But if you think this spells doom for the Donald, think again.
Donald Trump is going to want to make this to be as big a circus as possible.
He loves talking about the so-called deep state that's coming to get him, and this gives him that evidence.
What's happened today in Manhattan is an outrage.
We want Donald Trump to be our next president.
Let's be clear, folks. This is communist-level shit. This is stuff that would make Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, it would make them blush.
Emma Doyle is the former Deputy Chief of Staff in Trump's White House and is now the Managing Director of Bondi Partners. She joins us now. Emma, how are Americans reacting to this news so far?
I think it's very shocking for people. I think this is something we haven't seen before, and it feels very, very politicized. I think especially because the charges are difficult to understand. This is not a clear-cut case. It has to do with campaign finance. It has to do with hush money, which is inherently a topic most people don't have personal experience with. But I think that is adding to the layers of confusion for people that really make this feel like, okay, it's black and white. This is politically motivated.
Emma, you have like a unique insight into this because you intricately know the workings of the Trump team and the behind the scenes that go along with Donald Trump. During your tenure there, was Stormy Daniels ever a topic of conversation?
Not between the president and I. She was certainly in the news. It was always one of many topics swirling around the president that frankly made it a lot harder for us to do our jobs at the White House because there was so much noise from outside. We really wanted to focus on delivering policy results for the American people, and things like the Stormy Daniels issue made it a lot harder to do that. But no, the president and I never discussed her or anything to do with the case at hand.
Well, what would Trump's team, though, be doing right now to try and get back on that front foot? They were caught by surprise with the timing of all of this. So what are they doing behind the scenes right now?
So I think they're still in fight mode, but they are looking for examples of things that Democrats have done that have not resulted in indictments, that they're looking at the level of crime in New York City and whether or not the district attorney is spending his time on something politically motivated as opposed to maybe where Republicans think his priorities should be. But I think that the team's very used to being in a fight. So I think they're circling the wagons even tighter and getting ready to dig in because an indictment coupled with an acquittal, I think, would be explosive.
Do you see this potentially as something that galvanises his supporters, this becoming the start of his re-election campaign?
I do. And I think that the more that he draws parallels to this concept that they're coming after me because they're coming after you, the Trump voter. They're coming after Republicans, that this is a Democrat-led attack on Republican voters with Donald Trump just as the proxy. I think the more he makes that argument, that does resonate with a lot of people, including some people who otherwise might not prefer Donald Trump as their primary candidate for the 2024 election.
Emma, does anything fluster him?
Not much that I've seen, honestly. I think he's pretty used to living in the public eye, and he's used to being on TV, so he's used to being photographed. So at the end of the day, a mugshot is just another picture.
Do you think that Donald Trump is going to be the Republican presidential candidate?
I think as of right now, he's definitely the strongest contender for that spot. But we've got a long ways to go between now and then.
Emma, do you see this in any way being negative for him?
I think a lot of that depends on how he continues to message it. If it becomes more about him being personally victimized as opposed to, they're coming after all of us together and the MAGA movement, I think it's possible for people to react differently to that narrative, that it's, that support will remain strong. I do think there's a risk with some moderate voters in the middle, though, that as other candidates come into the race, we'll have to see what kind of case they make and whether or not they can argue that less baggage means more votes.
Wherever you sit on the spectrum of politics, this is such huge news and there is so much going on behind the scenes right now and there'd be so much adrenaline flowing. Do you miss being there and, being a part of it all?
I still get to follow it pretty closely, so that fills a little bit of that gap. But yes, I think it's always, you always miss it a little bit, not being directly in the fight.
Emma, we appreciate your time. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much.
Wow. Well, Steve Clemons is our man in Washington, D.C. Steve, what's the next step here?
Well, the big thing is that he has been indicted, first time in American history where a U.S. president been indicted. The next step is that he will be arrested. He will go to a police station. He will have his DNA taken. He will have fingerprints taken, and he will have his mugshot taken. So that's the next step in this process.
Steve, I think a lot of people want to know, when will we see him in a courtroom?
It probably will be within a few weeks where he is brought before a judge and he needs to enter a plea of whether he is guilty or not guilty. And we haven't heard a U.S. president sort of say those words, "I'm not a crook," since Richard Nixon. So it's going to be an interesting moment for all of us, but it begins a very long legal process after that moment.
Steve, it's very difficult to separate the criminal proceedings from the political here. What are the politics of this? I think it's hard for any of us to imagine Trump not using this and turning it to his advantage.
Well, look, he's already raising millions of dollars right now, playing the victim and sending out appeals to his supporters and voters to support him. And we see even his political rivals saying that this is the weaponization of law, the weaponization of the justice process, and going out. We even had Ron DeSantis, his chief rival as he sees it right now, saying Florida won't cooperate if he's extradited, which is funny because he's going to go anyway in there. But I think right now there's a bump for Donald Trump. I think the bigger question is what happens over time. And my hunch is that there's going to be a lot of late-night comedy shows that turn this into a long-running joke, and Donald Trump's going to have a hard time maintaining that sizzle of this moment. Over time, I think people are going to begin saying, who are we electing, who are we supporting?
I feel like I'm having a flashback to the start of his campaign for the Republican nomination. Isn't this exactly how he got there? The late night comedians making a joke of it, everyone saying there's no way. And all along, he was able to play this game and play the system to his advantage.
Well, look, I mean, we have a saying in America that, they don't care much about scandal, just make sure they spell your name right. And Donald Trump followed that maximum and did really, really well. You'd think a lot of people have already seen this show and might be bored, but the truth is that Donald Trump remains very, very popular within the Republican Party, far, far more popular than any other challenger in the party. And a lot of Americans do see this case against him as to being a flimsy one, basically falsifying records and using election law to bring down a former president of the United States seems to many people to be very, very misplaced in this moment. And that's what's getting him support.
That's what I was going to say, Steve. What is it, or is there something that Donald Trump could do that would actually force his supporters to rethink their support for him? Is there anything?
It's a really, really good question. I mean, there was a time where Donald Trump said he had so much support he could go out and kill someone on Fifth Avenue and nobody would do a thing. I hate to put it in those terms, and I don't want to see that tested, but a lot of Americans don't believe that messing around with elections should be a felony. We've all watched Donald Trump. He has evaded challenge after challenge legally of people who have accused him of all sorts of malfeasance and corruption, and none of it has stuck. I'm not saying he's guilty of any of it, but I will say he's good at avoiding, fingerprints on things.
Steve, what a time. Thank you for taking us through it.
Great to be with you.